Hey guys, welcome back. Episode 12 of the Next Season podcast. This is part 2 of the discussion of common challenges and pain points that we got from athletes, parents, and coaches that I ended up putting into 6 categories. In episode 11, we hit the first 2, which were under the talent and the effort categories. And today I'm going to give you some perspectives on the comments in the categories of ambition and mindset. And then we'll do mental health and well-being and the external pressures that today's athletes face. Again, I want to add the disclaimer. I'm not a doctor. I'm not a therapist. I'm not a counselor. I'm not a neuroscientist. I'm a baseball coach. I'm a father. I'm an athlete, a former athlete, certified brain-based coach. And of course, I'm a student. So I'm always trying to learn this stuff. And so I can speak to these things at a high level. I can share my ideas and perspectives and guidance that I've learned along the way that have been shared with me as I've sought this information out. I can have individual conversations and group conversations around mental skills and mental performance. But when it comes to diagnosing anything clinical, anything mental health, that's not me. Okay. So I want to make sure that that's out there. Same structure as episode 11. I'm going to give you the exact verbatim comment or words from the parents or coaches or players, noting their pain point, their struggle as it relates to baseball and the mental side of the game. And then for each, I'm going to talk about some basic and high level neuroscience, what's happening in the brain. And then third, I'm going to share some ideas or perspective from the point of view of if I were dealing with these feelings as a player, or if my child or my player was dealing with this, here's what I would do. And so again, present the challenge, obstacle, right? One from each category, discuss the brain-based stuff, and then here's what I would do. Okay, let's roll. Pain point number 3 is an ambition category. I think he's over practicing. It's almost like an addiction to reach his goals. Very interesting one. So now we're back on the other side of that coin, talking about somebody who is putting the work. So the first comment was around somebody who was undersized and they had some insecurities about that. So they may have been working hard. That was our underdog, right? The second category, the second comment was around somebody who had all the talent and skills and abilities and likely the size, right? All the natural gifts, but wasn't putting in the work. So now we're back again with somebody who is highly, highly ambitious to the point where either mom or dad or coach thinks that they are addicted to their goals and perhaps over practicing. And this one's really tricky. I want to be very careful not to throttle someone's work ethic and their drive and their ambition. And the truth is that the legend of athletics are often obsessed. And so we can look at the outside and think that they're going a little bit too hard in the paint, but that's how they got there. And that's how they became legends. And that's how they ended up making an incredible career and inspiring people. It's just reality. You look at Kobe and Mamba mentality. Okay. That's the mentality. You look at any highly driven person that we respect, that they make videos about, they write books about, they tell stories of, right? The ones that are the record holders, they're obsessed. And this could very easily venture into something in the clinical realm. And I want to be very careful not to go there. But from a strict work ethic, effort and drive and ambition perspective, yes, it can be very, very positive. As a parent, you may not understand it, but that drive is rare. And again, those legends are often obsessed. And one of the best things you can do, in my opinion, is bring awareness to the importance of balance without treating that obsession or addiction, as you called it, as a fault. It's about awareness. Let's go further on this. On one hand, again, it's that work ethic and that commitment and that discipline and dedication and all those great qualities that we admire in winners. On the other hand, we know that can lead to burnout or physical injury or mental health challenges. Let's talk about the brain aspects of this because there are 3 big ones that I want to talk about. Dopamine dysregulation, increased stress and cortisol, and then burnout. Okay, let's hit dopamine first. At a neural level, over practicing, I'm using your word, okay, over practicing can be driven by a craving for dopamine, which is that feel-good neurotransmitter. It's there to motivation and reward chemicals. Okay, each small achievement triggers dopamine release. So every time that they do something well, they achieve a certain result, it triggers that dopamine release and it reinforces the behavior and it creates that cycle of motivation. When that practice becomes excessive, though, the brain starts to adapt and the dopamine returns get less and less, making it harder for that same activity to satisfy you. This is where your word addiction starts to make some sense, because it's the same thing that we see, and I hate to say it, but it's the same thing we see in drugs. Okay. You get the drug hit, the dopamine increases, and eventually your brain starts to adapt to the same dosage. And so you need to up the dose in order to get that same feeling. Okay. This is what happens. When it comes to stress, I'm going to get a little clinical here. Prolonged over practicing activates the hypothalamic pituitary adrenal axis, which is the HPA axis. And that can lead to elevated cortisol, which is that stress hormone. And that constant stress state reduces focus, increases fatigue. It reduces the fun and the enjoyment that we experience and we have in the game, that childhood play. That's what I talk about. One of our core values is play. It's play with soul. It's got to be fun. And when we don't have that, we play the opposite. Essentially, the opposite is stress. And so it hampers long-term performance. So that's stress at a neural level. What's going on there? When it comes to burnout, overuse and overactivation of that prefrontal cortex, which is responsible for planning and decision-making, can lead to mental fatigue. So it makes you not want to make decisions. It's like if you're trying to figure out where you want to go for dinner, and it's like, I don't want to decide, or what are we going to watch on TV? You decide. That's often the prefrontal cortex just being fatigued and not wanting to make those decisions. Simultaneously, the amygdala, which is the fear, the fight, flight, or freeze, can become hypersensitive and increase anxiety about underperforming despite all the effort. And so when you have that response of, I'm so scared that I'm not going to be able to perform well, I need to put in the practice, I need to put in the reps, I need to put in the extra work. Okay? That could be a factor here. And that's going to put you in that sympathetic state. And here we go again, fight, flight, or freeze. And we cannot perform at our best when we're in that state of fight, flight, or freeze. So all of that practice and training and effort and ambition is on the wrong side of that bell curve. There's a term in medicine called minimum effective dose, or MED. And what it is, it's the measure of the lowest or the least dose or intervention that can produce the ideal outcome. So it's like, what's the least we can do to have the results that we want to have with this intervention? Anything above that minimum effective dose, and at best, you're facing a waste of time and effort or money or resources. And at worst, there could be diminishing or even temporary or permanent adverse effects. And so when you go too far on that, you take too much medicine, you train too hard, you put in too many reps, whatever it is, the effectiveness not only is decreased, but now you start to go into potential danger zone. Even when those behaviors turn into bigger problems, when they start impacting sleep, when they start impacting your relationships, your school, your nutrition, your diet, your emotional stability, those are all potential red flags. And you know your son, or you know yourself. And so balance is key here. I don't know where that is. So I'm going to be cognizant of the fact that, yes, the legends are often the ones that are obsessed, and also, and also, there are potential red flags. If I were dealing with this as a player or a parent, a few things that I would do to really try to work towards balance. First thing, set boundaries and ceiling goals. I would establish a max number of reps or a max amount of time that I'm going to dedicate to practice or training. And once I hit that number, I'm done. And that number may be higher than most other people. And that's awesome. But I'm going to avoid what's called jump volume that could do more harm than good. Okay. So I'm going to set those boundaries and ceiling goals. I'm going to shoot for that max number of reps or amount of time that I'm going to have. And once I hit that, I'm done. Second thing I would do, we talk about going hard, and we want to talk about working hard, and we want to talk about all that. We can recover hard too. So if you have an athlete that likes to train hard and work hard, apply that same hard mentality to recovery. There can be activity in rest and recovery and decompression. Okay. So maybe it's stretching, maybe it's meditation, maybe it's journaling, maybe it's visualization. Things that maybe are not taking that same amount of physical impact, but you can utilize the brain. And visualization is an amazing tool. I know we're going to go into this in even more detail than we already have, but don't undersell the importance of the value that you can get from doing mental reps. I know we're going to talk about it more and more, but visualization is one where you can actually get almost the same, if not more benefit from visualization in to supplement your physical training, right? It's not to replace but to supplement your physical training. But instead of having to take 200 swings, right? Maybe you take 100 swings, or maybe you take 50 swings, but you take 50 or 100, 150 mental reps where your physical body is not getting the grind, going through the grind, but you are maximizing your potential, and there's an increased benefit from doing so. So if you're somebody who tends to work hard, to go hard in the pain, apply that to your recovery, to your rest, to your decompression, okay? And you're going to see results. So the first two, again, set boundaries and ceiling goals. Second is recover hard. And the third is embrace your obsession. You don't let it control you, but your drive and your ambition and your work ethic is a gift. It's not a burden. Okay, so embrace that obsession, but you need to control it. The best athletes know when to push and know when to rest. Yeah, you're gonna work harder than most people, and you're gonna work harder than most people could possibly understand. But the only way that you can sustain that in your performance is balancing it with rest and recovery. And perhaps most important, another word I haven't used yet, is gratitude. It's great to be ambitious and to have that relentless drive for your goals and your improvement, but you need to have contentment for who you are and where you are. The fourth pain point that we have is under the mindset pillar. And here's the quote. He struggles to move on from a slump or mistakes, and it affects his confidence in the next setting. Another classic one, right? This one's big and perhaps one of the more common that we see in athletes, and it's about mindset. So those slumps and those mistakes often cause players to spiral and let them define their performance, all right? And it becomes their identity. So when you make a bad play or you make a mistake, you strike out, or you find yourself in a slump and you get frustrated, and then you lose focus, and then you make another mistake, and then you get frustrated even more, and you lose even more focus, and you start to ruminate on that, right? And then you start to spiral, and then you ruminate more, and that self-doubt comes in. Before long, your whole identity and your self-worth tank because you think this is who you are. And at brain level, some of the same things we've talked about in the earlier pain points, that amygdala is activated. So there's an increased stress and anxiety and fear. That enjoyment and fun goes down. And now you're playing in an overly elevated stress state, which is not ideal. That prefrontal cortex is suppressed, your rational thinking, decision-making, and your focus is thrown off. We're not present. We're not thinking clearly. And neuroscience shows that ruminating on those failures, so thinking about those failures and playing them over and over in your head, can engage the brain's default mode network, or DMN. And studies show that excessive activity in that DMN, that default mode network, can be linked to depressive or anxious thoughts. So when I describe that scenario of that frustration over a single play, spiraling and looping, the DMN is what's at play in that spiral. So what do you do? First thing I would do if I was that player or that coach or that parent is I would develop a reset routine. Teach players to use a physical or a mental reset cue to clear your mind after that mistake. And that's part of that rubber band trait. So remember, we snapped the rubber band on the wrist, okay? That grit, resilience, that perseverance and tenacity, snap that on your wrist and say snap back. Okay, that's just one technique, one tool, right? Pre-play, okay? So before each play, what are you telling yourself? Before each at-bat, what are you telling yourself? I talked with my son about this, and he came up with 3 words that he would say before every play when he was in the field and before every at-bat. Before every play, it's be, prep, execute. Be, prep, execute. So I'm going to be me. I'm going to be loose. I'm going to be free. I'm going to be myself. I'm going to be ready, right? Whatever that be is in that moment, prep steps, okay? Be ready, okay? And then execute. Just execute. Don't have to think about anything else. Just execute, okay? When he goes up to his at-bat, it's be, see, do. Be loose, be free, be confident, have fun, be me, whatever that is. Be present, okay? See the ball, do damage. Be, see, do. That's all you said, okay? So that's his reset routine. Step out of the box, take a deep breath, adjust your batting gloves, recite a short mantra like next play or I am or something along those lines. Whatever that is for you, it's got to be useful to you and relevant to you. And what this does is it helps you engage and activate that parasympathetic nervous system. It helps you calm that stress response and refocus your attention on the next task. So that's the first thing I would do, is develop that reset routine. The second thing I would do is reframe the mistake. I'm going to view mistakes as learning opportunities. Yeah, it's frustrating. Yeah, it sucks. It's embarrassing. It hurts. All of those things. But this is part of a growth mindset. And it's part of one of our 4 C's of curiosity. Instead of dwelling on that failure, you ask yourself, what did I learn? How can I apply it? Okay. What do I need to do different? Now I know how the grass is playing. Now I know what pitch he has. Now I know where this hitter's weak spot is, right? All of these things is reframing that mistake through a lens of curiosity of what can I learn? And this reframing shifts your focus from rumination, which is amygdala driven, to problem solving, which is prefrontal cortex driven, and it can allow you to improve your confidence and your clarity. Okay, so that's the second thing I would do. The third thing, I would set process-based goals, not outcome-based goals. Process-based goals versus outcome-based goals. So set those small actionable goals to regain control and confidence in that situation, and base them on the actions that you are going to take in that moment and the preparation that you're going to do to that point. And those are the things that you measure. Did you take the right steps? Did you keep your head down? Did you attack your pitches? Did you have the right mechanics on your swing? Even if the outcome wasn't what you wanted or the play wasn't made, you were present, you were focused, and you took the right actions, right? Great, focus on that. And what this does is those process-based goals focus on controlling the controllables. They're the actions and behaviors that are fully within your control. And when you set those, you direct your attention to what you can manage, such as your breathing or your stance or your pitch selection or your mechanics, your arm angle, your arm slot, okay, all of those things. And this fosters a sense of agency, that sense of control that you have within that moment, and a sense of accomplishment as well. And so it activates the reward system in your brain, dopamine, it reinforces positive habits, and it breaks that negative feedback loop of frustration, that rumination, that self-doubt that's associated with slumps. The other thing that was mentioned in that pain point from that parent was the word confidence. And again, part of your strategy to understand where confidence comes from is the evidence of the work that you've done and the combination of consistency and courage. So remind yourself, or even better, have some object or cue or something that you can anchor to and you can touch or you can see to remind yourself of that evidence. Okay. So that's where journaling can come in, or any number of things that you can have something physical, tangible that you can touch, feel, see that can remind you of the work you've done, that evidence of what you've done. The fifth pain point is in the category of mental health and well-being. And here it is. He's really struggling keeping his emotions in check, and it's not just on the field, but especially during the heat of competition. And so first thing, I'm not sure how old this player is, but age is a factor, okay? There's also another factor play here. We're humans, and we have emotions. We get triggered, and I think that word is misused or overused at times, but we get triggered more than likely because we care. We don't want to fail. It can be embarrassing. We all have emotional, defensive, burdened, childlike emotions inside of us, okay? Even as adults, and they come out at times. And everyone's upbringing, everyone's circumstances, everyone's personality, everybody is unique. Managing emotions is universal. This is a challenge. This is something that's prevalent everywhere. Okay, we all experience it. Managing emotions during competition is really tough, but it's a critical skill. A lot of it comes down to feelings that we have about other people's opinions of us. So it's in a sense of embarrassment, and it comes down to the fact that we care, right? The fact that we care. Emotional outbursts stem from an overactive amygdala. That's the emotional control center. When that amygdala is overstimulated, it can hijack the brain response, overrun the prefrontal cortex. Same things as we've seen in these other comments. And that's the area responsible for rational thinking and focus and decision-making. And this results in those impulsive outbursts, those impulsive reactions, such as throwing equipment or yelling or slamming our helmet, slamming our bat, throwing our glove, saying things that we shouldn't say, making poor split-second decisions on the field. There's something called the amygdala hijack theory. And this was introduced by psychologist Daniel Goleman, who wrote a book called Emotional Intelligence. If you've ever looked into or studied emotional intelligence, Daniel Goleman's probably the name that you've heard. But this hijack theory describes how strong emotions can impair judgment by bypassing the rational brain. And so that stress-related activation of the amygdala can lead to reduced activity in the prefrontal cortex, and it negatively impacts or impairs the decision-making, the self-control. And so what happens is during competition, this matters because we need to be thinking clearly, and we need to have emotional regulations in order to have optimal performance. And when you lose your emotional control, your ability to perform and enjoy is reduced or diminished. So classic example, you got a pitcher who is upset by a missed call. They throw a pitch and it should have been called a strike. Umpire calls it a ball. And the next pitch, he's ruminating on that, right? He's frustrated. He loses control of his emotions. He loses his composure. And so he throws another ball, right? And then the next pitch is in the dirt. And the next pitch is over the batter's head. And now you walk the batter. Next thing you know, you walk in a run. You got predictable patterns that hitters can take advantage of. And it all stemmed from that one moment where he loses his composure because of something that was out of his control. He cannot control the umpire's call, but he loses control and loses agency of his own emotions. He spirals, his physical performance diminishes. So what do we do? The first step is awareness. Bring awareness to these feelings and what may be causing the responses or the outbursts. What does it feel like? What's prompting this? When you start to feel those feelings, it's bringing awareness to them, right? What do you physically feel? Do you feel your heart rate increase? Do you feel your body temperature increase? Do you feel sweat? Do you feel like you start to shake? Do you feel something in your stomach? Do you feel something in your back? Do you feel something in your throat? Okay. Everyone has unique feelings that come from this increased stress. So the first part of this is bringing awareness to them, observe them. They're not wrong. Okay. They're not invalid, and they can sit in the car, but they don't need to drive. One of the best tools here is mindfulness. It's training to recognize emotional cues that can prevent escalation. There are studies that show that mindfulness practices can help modulate the amygdala activity and strengthen that prefrontal cortex, which helps you control your emotions. This is not something that's just one and done. This is a constant training that you need to go through. So if you're somebody who may be struggling with controlling emotions, outbursts, things like that, this is definitely something that you need consistent targeted practices on. A second tool is that reset or that snapback routine. It's related and can be effective in the moment. Another tool is visualization. We often think of visualization as a practice to see yourself executing on the field, and whether it's hitting or pitching or fielding or whatever. And yeah, that's a powerful use of visualization, but you can also practice visualizing how you're going to respond in emotional moments and how you'll handle those emotional moments, right? You can visualize yourself in a situation where an umpire makes a terrible call and how you compose yourself and keep it in check. You can visualize how you can handle a situation where you've already had the outburst and how quickly you own it. So you know what? I got it. I'm calming myself down. You can visualize that. That's practice. Okay. You can visualize how you're going to handle bad plays. You're rehearsing in those scenarios as well as how you're going to perform on the field when it comes to swinging the bat, hitting, pitching, fielding, things like that. By visualizing how you handle adversity, like a bad call or an error, you're priming your brain's neural circuits to respond more effectively in that moment. And what that does is that strengthens the connections between your prefrontal cortex and the amygdala and helps you stay composed when you're in those stressful situations. It's also going to build confidence. It's going to build focus. It's going to give you that sense of control and preparedness and that agency that improves performance. So those are a couple things I would do. I can list off a bunch of pro players who I know that do these things, that meditate, that practice mindfulness, that practice visualization regularly. But honestly, at this point, it's so common that there are probably more players who use visualization and mindfulness than don't. It's that powerful. As a parent or as a coach, you can reinforce that emotional regulation by modeling calm responses and emphasizing effort over results. It's easier said than done. Trust me. I'm there with you, but it is absolutely critical. The sixth pain point is in the category of external pressures of today's world. And here's the comment. He struggles when the new team isn't the right fit. He struggles when the new team isn't the right fit. And I don't have a whole lot of context for this, unfortunately. So I'm going to make, I'm going to make some guesses here as what's going on and just share some thoughts. When a player doesn't feel like they're a fit with a new team or any team or school or social setting or really anything, what's happening at the brain level, could be happening at the brain level, is the social pain pathways activate, particularly in something called the anterior cingulate cortex. And this is the part of the brain that processes feelings of exclusion or disconnection or isolation. And it reacts similarly to physical pain. And on top of that, we've got the amygdala. So that's the fight, flight, or freeze. That's the fear and anxiety that kicks in. And that creating that cycle of stress, cortisol spikes, and it can erode focus and performance. Human beings are wired for connection. We require them. And so when those bonds are missing, it's a psychological and a neurological challenge as well as a physical challenge. One of the worst punishments that people can experience is solitary confinement. Why? Because it deprives the brain of essential social interaction and environmental stimulation, which humans need in order to be able to function properly. So think back, I share this a lot, think back to our ancestors, right? To handle the dangers of the world, weather, wild animals, pretty much everything that could kill them, right? You required community. You required a tribe, a pack, strength in numbers. If you did something out of line, or you proved that you were a problem, you could get kicked out of that tribe or be isolated. And that's essentially a death sentence. And so generations of that tribe mentality and that pack mentality and the requirement of it versus isolation and the dangers of it, that's all now wired into our brains. And anytime that we experience similar situations, even if something is feeling excluded from a team, excluded from a group, not feeling like you're part of it, those neural pathways, those same neural pathways activate and trigger the same responses. And you cannot perform when you feel isolated, when you feel like you're not part of the team, and you spiral. And this is why being a good teammate is so important and why team chemistry impacts team performance. So yes, a team should be welcoming and have standards, but, and I'm going to also be very clear, it's also on you. I may be misreading this comment a little bit, but the way that I read it is this player has played on multiple teams and can't seem to fit in. And there's a common denominator. If no team is a fit, there needs to be some honest self-reflection on the why. If this was me, here's what I would do. Number one, I'm going to take ownership of me adapting to the team. I understand that building relationships is my responsibility. If I'm not feeling like I'm fitting in, I need to look in the mirror. When the wind does not serve, take to the oars, right? Ownership, accountability, responsibility. It's not about me expecting the team to adapt to me, but I need to find ways to connect with the group. Focus on what I can control. My effort, my attitude, my communication. Those small actions, like initiating conversations, starting conversations, joining team activities to build trust and camaraderie, not feeling like I'm better than anybody. Listen more than I talk. Now, I also want to be careful. You want to surround yourself and be part of that team and join those conversations, but don't try too hard. Take it slow and take it easy. But again, the biggest thing is you take ownership of your adapting to the team and not feel like the team needs to adapt to you. Second thing, make it a challenge and make it a game. Understand this is absolutely the norm in sports and life. You're going to find yourself in different environments with different teams and different people and different personalities. So if you're finding yourself as somebody who is struggling to fit into these different groups, make it a game or a challenge to yourself to become more of a chameleon and become more known as the type of person who can thrive in those different environments, who can develop relationships with people with different personalities, different types of people, right? Not just the ones who are like you. Even the difficult ones that others may struggle with. Make it a game. How many, I hate to say it this way, but how many friends can you get? Not in the sense of some artificial connection, but true connection and respect. I'm going to challenge myself to fit into this challenging environment. Make it a game. And then finally, again, it's just about remembering that team chemistry impacts team performance. It's not just something that we observe or some cliche. It's actually rooted in science. There's many articles on this. It's part of human nature. We talked about at the neural level what's going on when we feel part of something versus when we don't, and how that impacts performance. We are individuals playing in a team game. And so there's so many examples of championships that have been won by teams who were the underdogs, but they had team chemistry. They had that connection. They had an identity around who they are as individuals and as a team. And they went up against the artificially put together maximum budget teams of all the superstars that couldn't function in the locker room, that couldn't function on the field together because they didn't have this. So team chemistry impacts team performance. So those are your 6 pain points. I really appreciate the opportunity to share this. I hope these have been helpful. If you like these last 2 episodes or you found them useful, let me know. Comment, send me a message. Of course, as always, like, share, save them, right? That really helps get this out there and provides impact on more athletes, more teams, more families. So if you have any other pain points, let me know. We can definitely do this again. I have a whole bunch that I've already saved and written down. So I'm sure that I'm going to do this format again. But remember, these challenges, whether they're about talent, whether it's about effort or ambition or mindset or mental health or external pressures, they're all opportunities for growth. Talent is great, but talent is never enough. We'll see you next time.